Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here. This is a very quick intro to Beeranid 40K's second half of his interview, where we have finished talking about the LVO wrap-up, and now we're talking about our thoughts on competitive kill team in general. This was recorded about 2 weeks ago now, I think. 2.5? Something like that. So we don't mention elites at all. I just want to get that out there. This is out of date material that I'm force feeding you because clearly we need to have another interview about elites. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that about halfway through, Discord messed up and stopped recording the visuals, but it kept all the audio. So the audio is fine, apart from the fact that it's not, but that's my fault. But I fixed it as much as I can. However, for the visuals, about halfway through, I just removed the visuals and we just have our two logos on the screen. There you go. So if you're a podcast listener, or that's how you consume your content, you're painting while you listen, this is perfect for you. Nothing changes. For everybody else, I apologise for the audio. That is fixed from next week onwards when we're interviewing. I say we, me. I am interviewing Chris from LVO, who brought the Gellerpox. Okay, let's listen to the second half of Beeranid.
Of your LVO experience wrapped up,
yeah.
Let's move on to some more general things, if you're okay with that.
I sure am.
Okay, so we've discussed a little bit your prep work, training, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Obviously, having watched your channel, you seem to be, when you're doing your videos, quite into the math hammer, or the theory crafting, whatever people want to call it. How much of that do you actually do when it comes to picking a faction? So do you have your full list of 16 factions and you start the math hammer straight away? Or do you think, I like the theme of these guys, let's see what I can do with them? Or I've got these models, let's see what I can do. When does the math hammer actually start to dictate your list?
It's a little bit of the first two because, like, for example, with my cults, I just love cults, so I will play them. But the way I break down things a little bit is that I think of things in terms of archetypes. So Marine equivalents, Guardsman equivalents, things like that. And so instead of breaking it a weapon, for example, and comparing what it can do against 16 different options, I only have, like, say 3 or 4. And so I compare and I contrast and I see what is the best option to take against each faction. And then I do a bit of a balancing act. This is a lot of the play testing that happens is I have to see, because I can only take 20 models in that roster. I have to see what is the minimum. How hard does this counter have to be? Basically, can I get away with shooing in something from a Marine equivalent list and something that has no Marines simply because I'm limited on the amount of models in my roster, and there has to be some carryover with some factions. So that is a lot of the art of it. That's where the math hammer becomes an art in a way, because in Kill Team, it's one of the most beautiful aspects, as I see it, is the ability to not have a single take-all-comers list, to where now everything can kind of counter everything and have a fighting chance. And that's what I like. And then also, now as time has gone on, we've started to see more than just a certain faction, and I'm measuring things against a certain faction. It's builds within the faction that are popular. Like I said with the Death Guard. Well, this is what is popular. It's not just measuring against their stats. It's this specific build. And that's why I'm very scared for Tyranid players that think that they're going to run a 20-man roster take-all-comers thing in upcoming events, is because there are, I think, people like me out there that are now measuring against a specific build and working everything that they can do to take that out. And in your last one of the last videos that you posted, where you're talking to the 2 TOs from LVO, they were talking about in Canada, I guess they're getting ready to try a new format at one of their events, and it's not going to be a 20-man roster. It's 3 lists that can contain up to 20 men each with no commonality necessarily. And that is very interesting because now you're talking about, okay, Tyranids, you can bring a dedicated thing with no carryover necessary. Just this wipes out this specific build. And I still have 2 or 3 other lists for my other archetypes. And so, yeah, tough stuff, man.
Yeah, I'm still not sure if I'm convinced about that as a concept. I agreed with them. I think I've said this on every video now. I think the mustering phase is very ham-fisted and needs to be tightened up. However, I don't know if 3 separate lists is really the best idea, just because obviously, as you say, for any faction that can run a swarm, it allows them to run a swarm, but then doesn't give them any detriment to only taking a swarm. They can then run their elite list as well. And actually, I think because Tyranids have such a variety, you could take a swarm list, an elixir and warrior list, and I don't know, a gene stealer list. And suddenly,
you sure could. That's exactly what I would do.
Do against that? What do you do against that? You know?
Yeah. Well, you have to know the archetype and you know, prepare against that and figure what is the best option here. Like I was talking about with preparing for LVO. It was a lot of not only having a list for an opponent, but the mission, and depending on the opponent and the mission combination, I bring this. And I think that a lot of the problems in the muster phase come from the players, because I had my lists ready to go, and so did a lot of other people there. And so if there are people doing 15, 20-minute musters, there's a problem there because they didn't do their preparation. They should have their lists ready to go from that roster in a competition where people have paid money to be there. There's prizes and prestige on the line. It's just a courteous thing to do.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I think the mustering phase shouldn't be a list building phase. It should be you figuring out your secondaries, if anything.
Right. And you know, the list thing is, okay, here's my list from one of 3 prepared from that 20-man roster. It's exactly how I did it. And a few other people did it that way too, I noticed.
Certainly when I'm building, I have never mustered the way the rulebook implies somebody should muster. Yeah, I know my permutations from my command roster, and if you're bringing Tyranids, okay, I assume that I will need my swarm killing list. There you go. Yeah,
and I've seen people in the local campaigns, there are people that took a half hour to muster, and I was just sitting there waiting, and after a while I started changing what I was going to bring, because I mean, if somebody's taking that long, I'm figuring, well, they're not a very experienced player. I shouldn't take my super killy try hard list. So all of a sudden now I'm changing my thing, and it doesn't make them feel as bad, you know, that now I'm working on my list too, I guess.
Yeah, trying to play at their level.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, there is I can still give them a challenging experience at their level. You know, somebody who's new, I'm seeing what's in their box already, and they're looking at things and writing down numbers, and I can see what's on their card when they're putting little notes and ticks on and stuff. So it's just kind of changing things like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to take my kill them list. I'm just going to take a few things that I've wanted to experiment with and try on and test against this model. Things like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so kind of sticking with Mathhammer for a little bit longer here now. Obviously, Mathhammer is brilliant when it comes to deciding, you know, finding out damage outputs. That's exactly what it does. And it can also tell you, you know, points ratios. Well, actually, yes, this one does do more damage, but points-wise, it's less efficient, that kind of thing. Right. However, at what point do you step in there? Think of this as kind of, I don't know, a helpful tip for people that are just learning to build lists, as opposed to what you actually do, maybe. And at what point do you step in and say, okay, well, this model is obviously better at killing things due to the maths. However, you know, hypothetically, it only moves 5 inches, whereas the rest of my army moves 9. And it only has 1 wound, whereas the rest of my army has 2. At what point do you jump in and kind of common sense instead of Mathhammer?
Well, like I said, it has a lot to do with now, okay, I know what's best. I know what the counters are. Now it comes time to build a 20-man roster, and there has to be some overlap a lot of times depending on what you're taking. For example, Gene Stealer cults, your standard list is 9-10 guys. And so if you're taking that list, it now becomes impossible to take, say, a Space Hulk list, which does well against orcs. And anything else. So it's like, okay, well, then I would only have 2 possible counters here. And so you have to start taking things out and putting in some things from the other lists, the other counters that you want to be, able to draw from with your roster. And like I said, a lot of that then comes to play testing. Okay, I'm going to go against this thing. Here is my counter list, but I'm short 3 guys from this counter that would be the perfect counter, in my opinion, because these models have to swing in from my Marine list or something. And I think that they're the best fit compared to what I have in my guard list or something. So when it comes time to make the 20-man roster, that's a lot of times where I start to rely on my own judgment and a lot of play testing and losing and figuring things out, coming home, worrying about it, thinking about it, obsessing over it, and then changing things. And another great thing, though, before we move on from Math Hammer, is that I don't always just look at what I can do to them. A lot of times I look at what they can do to me.
Okay.
And because plasma spam was such a big thing. Like I said, my main opponent was Admech. And so I've had to, with Astartes, with Deathwatch, with Gene Stealer cults, with Tyranids, everything I play, I had to find out what is my most survivability or my most survivable models and stuff against this template. And Math Hammer has been very helpful for that too. Like you find out things like on first glance, people think, what is better? A 1-wound model with a 3-up invuln or a 2-wound intercessor? Well, you look at Math Hammer and you find out it was something like a greater than 66% survivability on a 1-wound model with that 3-up invuln than the intercessor. And you find out things like the intercessor against Overwatch Plasma that's buffed by an Omnispecs has the exact same survivability as a 1-wound model without that Storm Shield. Yeah. So it's really interesting when you start looking at the numbers. It really makes you a more informed player. Because you start to see, this has been kicking my butt forever. Sometimes you don't go to Math Hammer right away. It's after a few losses, and then you start dialing things in and trying to figure out where the issues are, and you find the answer there.
Now that's very kind of extreme list tailoring there. Knowing, okay, I'm going against this faction, which means I don't care about spending the extra points on that Storm Shield. I don't need it. I'm going to use everybody 1 wound because actually survivability-wise, it's the same, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, why am I going to run any intercessors if I can take something that has greater than 66% more survivability than this thing?
Definitely.
And I'm limited to only 5 models on that table. I need them to be performing and survivable and things like that. So,
quick question there. You mentioned kind of pivoting somewhat. Deathwatch, I assume you mean when you can only take 5 models.
Well, you can take more, but a lot of times you find yourself with 5.
I was going to say you can, if you take everybody naked, you can fit 7 Marines in. 7
yeah, and special issue ammunition makes that more viable than pleb Astartes, I think. But when you're facing plasma spam and you have 12 Overwatch plasma shots from round 1, and they put Shroud Psalm, the Canticle, on them that gives you a -1 in addition to the -1 that they already get for being obscured, and they can run and assault or shoot that assault weapon from cover. They just run in and get a great position and start shooting at you when you can't really hit them. It gets tough. So yeah, it is kind of extreme list tailoring, but it's kind of what needs to be done sometimes if you're taking this like really seriously and you're going to events outside of your state.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If you're already putting up money and time to go to something of that caliber, then yeah, you would expect to find competitive tailored lists.
Yeah, exactly. And then at home, you're experimenting for those things. You're trying, okay, well, I need to find out how this compares against this and how this compares against this. So instead of running only this kind of model at this point, I'm including both and seeing the performance there.
Okay. So I suppose a quick question, just because you mentioned it there before I move on. You said you'll run both options when you're taking, when you're in your practice phase. Do you tend to run a full list that you know works, but you will swap out a single model and you'll be focusing on how that one single model performs in that entire game? Or will you effectively scrap the list and say, I want to know how a normal basic veteran Deathwatch compares to a frag cannon, and take them both in a list that isn't meant to win, but is meant to show you how they perform?
Well, it depends on what I'm doing, but like a perfect example was like I was talking about, where you're debating on what has more survivability against plasma spam. Is it the Deathwatch veteran with a storm shield, or is it the intercessor? So you might run some storm shields, you might run some intercessors, and people look at you like you're crazy because you don't have one frag cannon on the board. But these are things that are meant specifically to counter, hopefully, the plasma spam, and I'm trying to figure this stuff out so they still have a chance. It's not the complete perfect thing yet. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, so powering on a little bit, why Tyranids and Gene Stealer cults? What is it about them that you like? Moving away from the rules a little bit here.
Yeah. So when I first got into Warhammer, it was actually through the books, and this was like 2005. And I used to have to take a bus 10 hours. I worked 10 hours with a 2-hour bus ride each way. And so I did a lot of reading. And I had a friend that had a similar situation, but he took other buses. This is Vegas. It's packed in. There's a lot of traffic, all this stuff. And so I'd show up at the casino, and we'd go in there, and I would have my books that I was reading, and he would have his books that he was reading. And sometimes something that he had would spark my interest, or vice versa, and we'd lend each other books. And so he had a Warhammer book one day, 40K, and I just thought it was really interesting. Purity Seals and Space Marines, and that introduction with the Emperor, the carry-on throne and this and that. And it really felt like the Marines themselves didn't know if he was still alive. It felt like, the way that they portrayed the bolters back then, where these guns were thousands of years old, relics that certain priests had to bless to get to work and stuff like that. They didn't even know how to operate their own stuff, basically, hardly.
Yeah.
And so that was just, really interesting. And it's a shame because I can't remember what that book was. I've looked and looked, and I don't think it's on their catalog anymore. It's just nothing in the descriptions for what I read in the older books is that book. And there were space orcs, like what? Just things like that. And then, so the guy found out that I liked it, and he didn't play 40K, but he knew about things like Space Hulk. And so he showed me like a Space Hulk sim on a computer from back in the day and stuff like that. And so the Gene Stealers were there for me from the very beginning. And when it finally came time to start playing 40K, like 10 years later, I wanted to run Gene Stealers, but this was 6th edition, and you had to also run a bunch of big bugs. And somebody, this is my first introduction to 40K on the tabletop. Somebody's trying to explain Synapse to me. I see a Tyranid player. I go over and I start asking them. They're explaining Synapse. I'm like, what? It was so clunky compared to how it is now in 8th.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't do that. And I had gotten some free orc models from the first store that I went to. And I just started painting. And then again, I spent a few years just painting. I didn't play that much. And then 7th came along. And in 7th, there was the Gene Stealer Cult re-release. And there had been no Gene Stealer Cults for years and years. And I was like, that's what I'm playing. But they were viewed as low tier. You lost a lot. And so that's where I started having to make them win and figure out cheese and things like that, because this is my faction. This is what I want to play. I was in a very competitive meta as a new player, getting stomped, and needing to find solutions. So that Steelers for me. It's just something that never really went away. They're the faction for me.
Now, I suppose going back, your introduction was through fluff then, the books, the novels. But obviously, Gene Stealers don't really get much in the way of fluff, do they? I mean,
No,
they're there as, you know, I'm a scary beast with ichor dripping from my mouth, but that's about it.
It's very contradictory. You read in certain things that, like certain old books, they could survive in the vacuum of space for 1,000 years, and then certain books, it's like, oh, well, we poisoned the air system and killed thousands of them. Just things like that. It's very contradictory. No, there are not a lot of books for them or the cults. And so I would just, read 40K stuff in general. I actually really like Space Marines. I just never really play them. And that's why it was kind of fun. Like I said in the beginning of this, I don't do Tactica videos for stuff that I'm not familiar with. And so I built a Astartes team. I built a Death Watch team, and I ran them and found that I liked the play style. And it reminded me of certain things that, people would ask questions, what chapter is this? And I had fun picking the chapters and things like that. So I discovered through that I like Space Marines more than I knew I did. So that was fun.
In a moment. However, do you have a favorite Black Library novel?
Yeah, probably Legion in the Horus Heresy series.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the Alpha Legion. They're one of my favorites.
Interesting. Okay. I would probably say mine is Hell's Reach, if you've read that.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. Listened to the audio drama a while back, and it was amazing. Yeah. And then that the new Richard Boylan series that he animated, you saw that?
Yeah, I saw that. He's just finished it, I believe.
Yeah, it was great.
Yep.
He did much justice to that. He did a great job.
Yeah, I thought the art style
Hell's Reach is great.
Was really good.
The Hell's Reach, what's it called? The audiobook. I loved it, and then I saw that some of the first episodes of his Hell's Reach work, the Richard Boylan art, and it was so good that I kit bashed a true scale Grimaldus guy. I started working on him and stuff. Never finished him, but it was so good that I was like, "Yep, I'm getting some bits off eBay." I'd wanted to do some Space Marines and stuff, and so I made a little true scale guy.
I always have issues with how Space Marines are portrayed in the fluff, but I think that book, Hell's Reach, was the first time where I genuinely understood why a Space Marine acted the way a Space Marine acts. Well, specifically with Grimaldus, who I thought he was a well-written character. Even though he was a psychopath, obviously, as all Space Marines probably are. It was like, he was a psychopath, but I totally got it. I was like, yep, a zealot would think that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you want to go start an Astartes kill team, doesn't it? Watching that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Are we going to see any of that on your channel?
Well, let's think. What have I just... So I've just put together 5 Grey Knights that I'm going to be starting to test tonight.
Grey Knights.
Yes, Grey Knights. Because I play against them almost every week, and I get schooled by them every bloody time. Even when I'm taking my Gene Stealer cults, with my carefully math-hammered out list, I get wrecked. And
they're good.
Do some wrecking.
Yeah, that's what I lost to in that final round of the event up here. I had my 1 point loss to. Yeah, because it was a single list event, and you just had to take one thing and do your best. And I beat Harlequins, I beat Tau, and then it got to be. And these were tough games. And then it got to be that, and I'm like, this will be easy. Nope, because he had gone whole game, the whole event with no loss too. And so here we were, the only 2 undefeated players, and he got me. Yeah, that Incinerator man did a good job.
Oh, strength 6, AP -1 flamer. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, you are not.
Lictors don't like that.
No, they do not. Yeah. Yeah. The way my opponent gets me is he only uses his CP on rerolls for smite, and then the wound in the smite roll, and it just so it means he basically is guaranteed a kill, 1 kill a turn, and it's going to be on a model that I have very carefully charged into his. It's like,
now I kind of think that Grey Knights like close combat because of that, because then you have a choice of where you drop that, and they're also no slouches in close combat. They can have some really good
3 damage or 3 damage. Yep. That's painful for everybody.
Yeah, Grey Knights are good.
Although interestingly, we haven't seen them in any top tables.
Well, that's because it's objectives games. Like I said, 6 objectives on the table. You're starting with 5 guys. That starts to get a little rough. But in a campaign, something like that, they can do well, I think.
Yes, yeah.
I think that there's actually Kill Team's in a weird place because there's actually a few different ways to look at the meta. You have the campaigns, you have arena, you have the actual tournaments, and they kind of give different things and push certain things forward. Like in regular Kill Team, I think that shooting has the advantage. I really do. Like I said, you can take and make unchargeable models, set them up on top of the right piece of terrain. Now you cannot get them. And as a close combat army, I have to get to you over the course of, say, 2 turns before I can start causing damage. And if you whittle me down too far, it's hard to get past that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man. Yeah. But Grey Knights can do it. Grey Knights are good in that the standard 100-point games, I think. I think Commanders is a separate meta, too.
Well, I do have questions about Commanders. Yes. We will come to that. Yeah. But okay, moving on back to my regimented list of questions. So, in your last video, you said that you are about to go ahead and do a tactical on AdMech. Which leads me to the question. Obviously, somebody first sees your channel, they're Beeranid. They're going to assume beer probably turns up, although I haven't seen any beer-related things.
Yeah, I don't drink. I grew up in Vegas and I don't drink. I had enough before I turned 18 for a lifetime. I was a musician, so
why the name?
Because I like to play on words. I like.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I like. It's funny to me to play with words, and I like Gene Stealer cults, and I figured they're Tyranids that drink beer. I wanted the channel to be identifiable as something to do with Tyranids or Gene Stealer cults, and so I figured, Beeranid 40K, that pretty much gets it.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you actually, or are you going to, despite your channel name and your obvious, first love is Gene Stealer cults, are you actually going to at some point play all factions?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yep. I either have to play them all or play against them a sufficient amount before I can make a Tactica video for them. So that's why I haven't been rolling them out as quick as I would like to. AdMech, I feel, after 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever, of just getting the crap pounded out of me and trying to dish it back with multiple factions, that I know enough about them to speak decently at this point. But there are some other things that I would like to work on, and I would like to start with things that people don't think of as good, like Heretic Astartes I want to work on. However, something that a lot of people have been asking for is Imperial Guard, and I've had some Death Corps of Krieg models for years that I got just to paint. I never thought I would run them in games. I had them, 6th edition 40K, and so I've been building those up, finding plasmas here and there, and trying to build up a roster of those. So that will likely come out before some of the others, but I have bits for Death Guard, the Krieg guys. I could honestly build a Heretic Astartes list in a day if I had to. I have the 20 cultists. I have as many Space Marine bits as I would need to do it. It's just finding the time, finding games to make that happen. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming up for that. I don't necessarily have to play all the different factions, but I would like to. I have enough to do Kroot, probably. If I Yeah, yeah.
I suppose in that same vein, kind of, on upcoming videos, you've mentioned on your channel, I believe, that you want to do bat reps. How's that
Yep.
going? And what format is it going to take?
It's probably going to be just whatever I can find at that time with different gamers in my area. Like I said, I'm very lucky because it's a pretty competitive meta, and I'm getting luckier as time goes on because like at LVO, somebody recognized my voice and asked if I had a YouTube channel, and then somebody else asked for an email because they said they live up right by me, and then they recognized the name from the email, and it turns out that they're only a few minutes from me. So I have, for time, I'm having quite a lot of a pool of players that might potentially be interested in doing that with me. It's just a matter of finding things like cameras, a place where I can record legally, because we are in the town of paparazzis and all that, and people are really weird sometimes about filming in their stores.
Okay.
So it would be like, okay, do I start inviting people to my home? How does that work? Do they let a stranger into their home? Do we find a game store that's going to let them do it? I mean, just things like that, because there's only some people that I know actually fairly well. Other people, you've had a game here and there, but is that enough for them to have you come by?
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I'm in a similar situation. I'd love to do a full battle report, partly just because I play with some very interesting characters, and I would like to show people how different people play, because I think that in itself is interesting. If you've only ever played with, your small group of friends, seeing how somebody else plays could, not in tactics, but in just the way in which they play, can be quite interesting in itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's interesting, and it's something that I'll look forward to, because, like, for me, I have the local guys are, like, say, for example, ITC players that do 40K that have started to, like, Kill Team. And so they're bringing that very competitive mindset to Kill Team, and so it'll be hopefully fairly competitive style bat reps, but with a wide variety of different factions. Well, it's no reason for me to start building things up, that's for sure, because people might get sick of it if I start just playing Gene Stealer cults all the time.
Well, yeah, you gotta think about that as well, of course. Yeah.
It's Gene Stealer cults again, folks. Welcome back to Beeranid 40K. Let's watch a similar bat rep to the exact one we did last time.
To be fair, it's
It's just one faction.
Yeah, no, you're right, of course. Okay, so moving back a little bit, you had mentioned commanders. Let's talk commanders. Firstly, have you played many commander games?
Yeah, yep. I've had a chance to get them in. I love it. I think that the meta is completely different.
Yes, no, I agree. It's basically a different game. You're doubling the points, but you're adding a strong hero unit. And I think the games I've played have been fun. But as I've said to others, swingy. If I take an Eldar Autarch with fusion pistol and wings, he can move 22 inches turn one, just because he's got wings. And
nice.
Yeah, and if you've got a guard commissar for 20 points, well, you may as well not have taken a commander. So do you think... Oh, and so, sorry, as a community, we have decided that, okay, commanders, fun, but it's narrative. We're not going to make that a competitive thing. Do you think there should be competitive commanders?
Yeah, because I think that it gives a different... it changes things quite a bit. Like, for example, my Gene Stealer cults that struggle in standard 100-point games are really good in commanders. You have the Primus that makes a great strategist spec. You have the Magus that is an amazing psyker. And all of a sudden, they fill certain gaps that some factions have that there weren't that many answers to. The Gene Stealer cults, a lot of that was range. So we had great melee with the rock cutters and things like that. Now all of a sudden we can spam mortal wounds from across the table with the Magus. Yeah. So we have some shooting now in commanders, and that made us a more complete kind of a kill team. And so I think that, yeah, I do think that commanders should be a thing. And I think that commanders tourneys would be fun. I think that people should have done that already, and that it would be harder now to gather a lot of support than perhaps if they had done it the month after release, because now more people are into, say, Arena and downloading the Annihilation rules from LVO for free and playing Arena-style stuff with terrain. So it's going to be harder now that so much time has lapsed, but I think that it offers a lot.
Yeah, I have pretty much the same stance. While I just said, you know, my games were swingy, you know, all games are swingy. If I take a non-competitive list against a very harshly competitive list, well, that's going to be a swingy game. You know, you might table me first turn, second turn. And while Commanders changes the meta, and as you say, fills in gaps for some teams but doesn't for others, it's at least going to change things, which is not a bad thing. It's just a change, you know, different, not bad. But yes, I also agree that we haven't had a competitive Commanders game. And of course, Warhammer World coming up has an Arena tournament.
Yeah.
They completely skipped doing a Commanders tournament, which seems a huge loss. I can't know why, to be honest.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. You know, who knows? Maybe somebody will bring it up. Every event is different. Me and my friend joke around, like, why can't anybody just run things out of the rule book? Well, because it's like, oh, this is a single list tournament, and oh, this is this. But though the terrain, you cannot land on top of terrain. So things like Tau with Fly or Reavers with the grapnel launchers are suddenly slightly nerfed. Just things like that. So somebody running that direct from the rule book would be very nice. And, you know, you might see that hopefully locally.
Certainly I've been in, or my local tournaments have been, here's the rule book, do what you want to do. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So we're both kind of on the same page with the Commanders. Both sad that it hasn't been out there.
Yeah, it hasn't been leveraged as much as it could, I guess, is how I feel about it. And we'll have to see what happens if things get really quiet with releases or something. We never know what GW has planned. If there's a lull, we might see some weird stuff pop up, like on the West Coast, there's a big tournament and it's a Commanders thing, 200 points. But I think that Commanders, you know, if you look at the 7th edition kill team, for example, that was at 200 points. And so that's right about what GW has always kind of thought kill team should be played at. About half of the lowest of a standard 40K game. So, you know, you take 500 points, you cut that in half, you cut it down 50 more points, and you get a kill team game.
Yeah,
so
roughly 1 and a bit squads of men. Yeah.
I think that kill team at 100 points is the best, but I think that 200 points starts to open up some doors. Because, for example, you have Tyranids that can take 20 bodies at 100 points. Well, at 200 points, if you bring a strategist spec from something for 60 points, now all of a sudden you have 140 points to bring your little guys. And that strategist specialist, all he's doing is buffing your normal kill team. So it starts to open some doors for other teams, definitely. I think.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And it opens up things too, like nobody does shooty nids. You look at an all DACA bug build in standard 100-point games, it's not going to do well.
Weird, sadly, because they do have decent shooting. Their guns are good.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You put a strategist specialist prime, and you buff things up to 200 points, and then all of a sudden you have 10-point termagants that are able to do something similar to a gene stealer in terms of damage output, or even a warrior just without the -1, if you're talking about straight rending claws, at 18 inches. Yeah. That's amazing. And then your one warrior gunner that you're only allowed to take can shoot 3 times in a phase. It's like all of a sudden this one model you were only allowed to bring 1 of in 100-point games. It's like you have 3 of them. That's really cool all of a sudden. So it lets you bring out more of your model collection, in my opinion.
Which is exactly what Games Workshop wants, which makes it even weirder that they're not pushing it.
I think there was some backlash. I think that they got some backlash for too many releases too soon, and that they kind of maybe brushed it under the rug a little bit. And there were some other things with, say, the start collecting boxes and stuff going out of print, it started to be a weird time in the press for GW and Kill Team. So they're riding that, I think, with Arena and trying to maximize sales on that and stuff.
Which also makes a lot of sense. You know, people do like things to be competitive. A lot of the big games out there, not from GW, are competitive games, and obviously Shadespire is their official competitive, more a board game than a miniatures game, and it's done very well. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. However, talking about Arena specifically, what are your thoughts on Arena out of the box?
Arena out of the box, I like it. Like I said, I think it solves some problems that you had with terrain. When you're talking about balance, I mean, it's not going to be chess. It's always, Kill Team's more going to be like paper, rock, scissors a lot of times with counters and whatnot. But it solves the problem of terrain. Like I said, terrain has won and lost games. It is a factor that you cannot account for with list tailoring and things. And if you're a player that wants to take the most responsibility for your wins and losses, it's hard when you have somebody putting something, just because of a dice roll, they get a side of the board that has, even though it looks like the same amount of terrain, well, that wall has 2 more inches than your wall. Or this one has a hole in it and theirs doesn't. And they're a shooting team and you are a assault team, so you have to get to them and get through some of these things or get on top of something. And so it solves a lot of the issues there that can crop up from that can be taken advantage of and gamed in a way
that is part of the game, though. You know.
Well, I mean, it's the same. Would it not be very similar to modeling for advantage? Like in the Space Hulk board, there's a Gene Stealer model that is coming out of the ground, and all he is a head and 2 little claws. Would you not be mad if I did 9 of those? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, he's modeling for advantage. It's kind of beardy. So it's kind of like that when you're playing an assault team and you have a 12-inch tall piece of terrain at some game store that's running an event, and he parks 3 guys on top of that base to base, so you cannot actually fit there to do a charge. I've had this happen with rail rifles and comm specs and stuff. It's like, oh my God, how do I get to that? I have no shooting. So it solves that kind of a thing. I do think that terrain is the funner way to play. I think that it's a more challenging way to play. And so in local games with your friends, I think that terrain is the way to go. But if you're going out of town, you're paying for a ticket, all this stuff, it really sucks to see, oh man, he's got 2 more inches there. I have a hole on mine. He does not, this and that. It's just kind of like, this solves that in a way.
Yes, I agree. And as somebody that also enjoyed XWing, I don't know if you've played XWing.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's a very good game, Tyrell said. I think that I don't have a problem with moving things towards a 2D board. That works for me, to be honest. So,
well, I think the best way that they did it was Nova, because you had the terrain. Like I said, though, there were problems because certain things were nerfed with the grapnel launchers and whatnot. Yeah. But you had terrain, but you couldn't land on top of it. It was a full line of sight block, just things like that. It was still a tad uneven because the Kill Team terrain was not perfectly balanced, but it was pretty close. And so looking at those boards, I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of like a really good Kill Team competitive setup. And so this does that in a way. One thing I don't like about Arena is the doors. Really haven't. Wow. This is why I haven't been doing videos. Haven't done too many videos on Arena yet because I'm still looking at things and thinking about cheese. And where is the advantage here? Who has the advantage? What are the answers to these new questions that we haven't had in 6 months unless you were playing Rogue Trader, which nobody really did.
That kind of got skipped over a bit, didn't it?
Yeah, I wanted the board because I wanted to run my Gene Stealers on it, harken back to that Space Hulk thing. But it's kind of like, I think that the board is really cool without the doors.
Right.
So,
what's your issue with the doors specifically?
I think that it wastes certain things. Instead of getting to the game, it extends positioning in a way that is kind of hit and miss and throws unneeded obstacles, unneeded time when you've already had to muster and all this kind of stuff. It's just like, get to the game. These are your objectives. This is the terrain. I think it's fun to have that option, but like I said, I don't know. Maybe I haven't figured it all out enough yet. I haven't spent enough time with it, but from now, for what I'm seeing, it's kind of like, I can live with that Overwatch thing. People are freaking out about the close quarters, the fire Overwatch. Yeah. I can live with that, man. That I think is cool. I think it's great.
That what?
Yeah, you get to do it one time. People think it's the most broken thing ever. It's like, no, you can do it one time. So you set up 2 charges with 4 models. What are they going to do? Yeah. It's a null charge times with a 4-point model. Okay, they wasted one of those times. Now 2 lictors. Boom. They're screwed. Yeah. It's not as broken as people think. That, I think, is fine. I think it's a good addition to a close quarters game. But the doors, I just haven't figured out a thing for those yet, how I feel exactly.
I think my thought on doors is, yes, it slows the game down. However, that's not necessarily bad. However, doors prohibit movement as opposed to allow the game to occur. And any rule that stops you from doing something is inherently probably bad. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have some mixed feelings because, see, again, you look at something like Plasma Spam and you only have 5 models. Well, you can close the door. Or same thing, or you got somebody with a huge flamer that you know is going to come. You close that door. So I see it. It's like I said, I just haven't spent enough time with it yet and figured it out and decided how I feel about it yet. But I do see issues with things slowing things down, with it being kind of clunky in mechanics maybe, and you have people that are maybe new that are trying to get into competitive that might get turned off by some of this weird stuff because they already have to charge in against shooting and do this kind of thing. Just kind of like, I don't know.
I think the doors might need an FAQ, possibly, or an errata, perhaps. Just, I don't know. Even if we just find out, you know, well, I don't know if you know, but rules as written, they block line of sight, but they can still be gone through. So, for example, a TOW smart missile system can shoot through doors. Rules as written, which is obviously, I want to work on that.
Yeah, it's just going to take some time. I think, like I said, like we were talking about with the meta earlier, we need to let Kill Team breathe and figure some things out.
It's only been 7 months since it released.
Yeah. And a lot of times we're trying to apply 40K principles to it that don't apply anymore, really. Like how many years have we had to focus on a take-all-comers list? Everything is built around that when we talk about meta and top-tier factions and things, and it's not like that anymore. So we just need to give it some time. I'll see how I feel about it. I don't know if it needs an FAQ or anything like that. I just need to spend some time with it.
Yeah. I think on your point there, Mike from yesterday, when I recorded it with him, mentioned that he's heard or spoken to or heard through the internets Mike Brandt, one of the kind of main play testers for Kill Team for GW there. He keeps pounding on the idea that players are not yet using the command roster to its fullest. You have to use the command roster. That is the game. Yeah.
I agree.
And
I think that people are, I think that it's still something that people don't get. And even tournament players, like I said, there was an Astartes player with 5 guys. This is my roster. And it's like, you can do better than that. you're not using a crucial aspect of the game that makes it competitive. And then these same people, like we were talking about earlier, you can go on the internet and write, and
yeah, of course,
they can say, "Oh, Kill Team sucks. It's not competitive. It's fluffy." It's like, well, are you using your tactics? Are you maximizing your roster?
Yeah.
Are you interrupting what they're trying to do? Things like that. So, yes. Tangent over.
No,
Rant over.
Indeed. I mean, a lot of, let's say, new players maybe might look at Decisive Move and say, why would I want to move first? Who cares? But actually, as you were pointing out in your LVO games, Decisive Move, although, 1 CP and maybe when you first see it, doesn't kind of make sense, that right there is a charge that stops the enemy from getting a charge off on your leader, perhaps. It could potentially be a huge thing.
Yeah, it's almost like a game where imagine you're playing chess, right? But you're saying, oh, well, instead of taking all my pawns, I'm going to take 2 queens. They say, okay, well, I'm going to take 4 rooks then. And I'm going to spend 1 CP to, put this guy on Overwatch so that he automatically kills you if you move your queen here. Your queen says, well, that's fine. Your opponent, okay, that's fine. Well, one of my queens starts at the center of the board and can still move. It's like that. It's like it's so involved and so ultra competitive that
yes. So let's
okay.
Do you think? And obviously you do, but I've got to ask the question to then do my follow-up. Do you think Kill Team is a competitive game?
Yes, I think it's more competitive than 40K, actually.
Now, do you think that because of the rule set that's provided, or what makes you say more competitive than 40K?
Yeah, the rule set, the ability to do things before somebody else does, the fact that if I get initiative, I have to go first, the fact that when you're deploying, you set one model down and I set a model down, but then you move all your guys and I move all my guys, but there could be tactics there to disrupt who gets to move there first. And then you start alternating where this guy shoots and then that guy shoots, and it really matters who shoots first, who charged first. This guy's in combat. Did he get to make his back out move before I charged in, locking him in combat? It is intense. So it's so different than set up all your guys, whatever. Turn rolls around. Okay, I'm going to seize for initiative. Nope, this and that. And then you get blown off the table because they can move. They can do all their charges. They can shoot everybody. They get to attack all before you have an answer.
Yeah.
So, I'm not I don't know. As more time goes on, it's getting harder and harder for me to care about regular 40K because, like, if I watch a bat rep now, just like, 5 pieces of terrain and they're doing this, it's just like boring. I don't know. It's not the same to me. It's not as intense. And whereas Kill Team, it's move by move, man. You could have somebody calling that out as it's going on. Oh, he's got this. He's moving here. Oh my gosh, he's got this. Oh, this is a big upset. He's getting in. Oh my God. You could have somebody narrating what's happening, like football or
exactly
whatever.
Alex was saying the potential to in some way create content in that manner, whether it's streaming, narrating, whatever, is, I think, significantly better than 40K. And that
there's not
more watchable and more engaging. Yeah.
There's not huge gaps of time where somebody's doing nothing.
Yes.
That's a big thing to be said for when you're talking about, you look at esports right now and stuff like that. You have Magic the Gathering being filmed, and it's a lot of, I do this, I reply, this happens before you can do this, blah, blah, blah. It's intricate and reactive, and Kill Team has that.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
No, indeed. Indeed. So, now, kind of the follow-on question to that. If I were to replace, or if you were to replace, I want to play a competitive game with I want to play a balanced game, do you think all of our thoughts are still valid and identical? Or do you think there is a notable difference between competitive and balanced?
That's hard to say. I think that all of how I feel and what I've said would still hold true. I think that Kill Team does have a lot of balance through that command roster, through the ability to list tailor. There could be a few more units that might fix things up for certain factions, but there is an aspect of for example, Death Guard comes along. Okay, well now I shoot the heck out of Death Guard with my plasma spam. Well, okay, well now my Gaunt spam really hurts plasma spam and keeps them from doing what they want to do. So now an elite list comes back because they have flamers and missile launchers and stuff to counter the horde. And then plasma comes back. I see this meta as just a fish eating a bigger fish, eating a bigger fish over and over again. So like I said, it's more rock, paper, scissors than chess is how I see it. And I think that it is balanced through that. I think that there are good matchups and bad matchups. But overall, in the scheme of things, if you're talking thousands of games or something, if you were to measure this out on a computer, I think that it would be pretty balanced.
Okay. Fair answer. I agree. I think that rock, paper, scissors is a perfectly valid form of balance. I do not think that every faction must be able to take every single unit and have every single build be valid against every single other build. I think that's madness. That way lies. You know, rock, paper, scissors is entirely valid to be a balanced and still competitive game.
Yeah, it's like if rock could take some elements of scissors against paper, or something like that. It lets you have a chance. Like I said, there are still good matchups and bad matchups, but it isn't. Oh, I have this, so I just show up, roll dice, and win. And I think that turned some people off. I think that a lot of people thought that they were going to be able to power game here, and they drop out. I've seen it in the meta here. People that steamroll in 40K don't last in Kill Team. They come in, they start doing stuff, they get countered, and then they give up. They don't go and get a new model, find a solution, run the math hammer, and figure out the answer. So, yeah.
I mean, I've got to be honest. I am not really a 40K player. So I haven't seen that so much, but it is very interesting if that is what's actually happening.
A lot of Kill Team players aren't, and I like it because they're not afraid to try certain things. I think that you shouldn't put something as not an option. I come up with the craziest, weirdest ideas of things to try, and I think that that's some of where the success comes from, is that nothing is an automatic no. I will try it. And I think that a lot of new players and non-40K players coming in don't know what they're doing and settle on weird lists like we were talking about with that Death Guard player. It was something that was like, what? What is this? And that happens. And it happens to good counters. It happens where you might have thought you won. That happened to my friend in the campaign. One of his only losses was to an Astartes team. And here's a plasma spam AdMech list that is specifically tailored to beat this. And the guy's bringing flamers and stuff, and he wins. It's like, what happened? Well, he didn't know what was wrong, and so he went for what felt right and ended up winning. So, yeah, it's just a weird situation.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, before we leave Kill Team and kind of wrap things up, do you have anything else you want to say about it?
No, I think we covered it mostly.
Yes.
I think if you're thinking about it, try it. That it has something for everybody. If you're into fluff, it has fluff. Not everybody is an ultra-competitive power gamer. There are little pockets of players in each area from what I see, and they find each other. And whether you're a super competitive guy or a not super competitive guy, there's somewhere a little group for you, whether it's beer and pretzels night or prepping for some kind of a big tourney. So it's something for everybody. If you like fluff, if you've been reading the books, stuff like that, try Kill Team. Or if you are disenchanted with something else, Magic the Gathering or big 40K, give it a shot. It's not a big price point to enter. Just get in, get a couple things. What I will say, though, if you start to take it seriously, whatever your first faction is, get everything. Every option that you can have and build and bring it, because there seems to be a place for everything, and there's only a limited amount of models. And I see a lot of people saying things like, oh, this unit is trash. For example, hybrid metamorphs with the Gene Stealer cult. And in 9 out of 10 matches, they're right. But if you take that hybrid metamorph and you put a lash whip on him, he becomes a really good answer to something like Harlequins. Because, yeah, they charge in, they do their 4 attacks, they kill you before you can do anything, but suddenly you get to hit back with your attacks. So it's like, whoa, this was unexpected. This is new, and that trash unit becomes a really good counter. So if you're just starting out, you're getting into this, test the waters, have fun. When you start losing, start looking into building up your roster, building up your model collection, and try to have pretty much everything that you could bring, because you never know when you're going to need an answer. And in a campaign, which I think was a great experience, I hope that GW continues to support that and dishes out more of those. You don't just have your 20 models. You start with a certain amount, and then you can add next week, and then pretty soon you can have full counters to pretty much anything. And all of a sudden, people that were in the top are dropping out, or way in the bottom or something like that, because enough people found an answer to their single list that was raffle stomping everybody. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, so to sum up there, Beeranid 40K says, buy everything. This comment sponsored by GW. Nice.
Yeah, I don't get anything from GW, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, of course.
Not one free thing. Any unboxings you see is Beeranid's hard-earned cash. So
if Games Workshop wants to change that, you can contact him at...
just Beeranid at Gmail. A lot of people think it's Beeranid 40K at Gmail, but Beeranid at Gmail. And I will say, I get people that try to write to me on there. If I don't answer, write again, because if I post a video, I get an email every time somebody comments in that. And if I get 400 comments or something, it's buried. I also get a comment every time somebody subscribes. In my first 6 months, that's how long it took me to get 1,000 subscribers, and it's been about 1,000 every month since. So if I'm getting 1,000 emails a month from people subscribing, just a notification from YouTube, your email might get buried. So I apologize for that to those of you who have written in that haven't received an answer or something. If you're trying to get a hold of me, write in. If I don't answer, write again. Always happy to talk Kill Team.
And before we go away, my random question is, Warhammer Age of Sigmar, does that do anything for you at all?
No. No, I could be tempted to look at the new skirmish game that's coming out, but yeah, I'm a sci-fi guy more than a fantasy guy. So if it's got mutant hybrid aliens, I'm in. If it's got magic, a lot of times I'm not.
Okay.
It's got to have that suspension of disbelief, because I came into this as a fluff fan first, and it took 10 years of reading before I started rolling dice. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of both. And I'm very excited to see what they come up with for Warcry. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, now they've had a lot of time to sit on Kill Team and think about it and figure out what's right about it and everything and try and build on it. And the card mechanic of Shadespire or Underworlds, I know that some people are very particular about the name, but that seems very interesting. I noticed that we have something kind of similar with our CP Tactics and Kill Team. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. I will be watching about it, but I probably won't be talking about it on my channel or getting into it, if I'm honest.
That's fair enough. Okay, well, unless you have anything else you want to say or questions you want to ask me, I am all done.
All right, well, I just would just say thanks. Thanks for having me on, taking the time and reaching out. It was very kind of you, and I'm honored. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you very much. It's been great to have you on. It's always interesting to get other views and opinions, whether they are content creators like yourself or players. It's always just good to know what's happening, I think. And that's the only way we can really form an opinion that is hopefully a little bit more level and unbiased than random salt that we throw around online.
Yep, agreed. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much in that case, Beeranid. and we will talk again later, I hope. Say goodbye to
Sure. All right, everybody. Have a good night, good day, wherever you are in the world.
And thank you very much, everybody, for watching. This has been Beeranid. Obviously, I will be linking to his channel in the description below. But if you follow me, you probably already follow him. If you don't, you definitely should. This has been Glass Half Dead, saying goodbye.